The PS5 generation has been a very strange time for PlayStation gamers. The console released amidst a global pandemic, during a supply chain crisis, and under the new leadership of Jim Ryan. Needless to say, even though the console has been out for a few years at this point, it has been hard to really predict what Sony's overarching plans for this generation are, especially when Sony themselves seem to be more and more quiet and not eager to reveal their hand, especially this year, as we continue to wonder about a showcase. But over the past few months, after piecing together disparate bits of information from leaks, financial presentations, and the occasional actual announcement, the clouds have begun to dissipate, and we are able to get a much clearer picture as to what Sony's strategy actually is with this new generation. Dr. Pooplove here, and today I want to talk about Sony's big plans for the PS5 and beyond. And if you're as ready as I am for them to start finally spilling the beans, then hit that like button so we can spread the poop love around the world. But let's get right into it. And where we should start is with what seems to be phase one in this process, and that is to release a fully priced narrative single-player remaster, remake, or director's cut. Now, examples of this are Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy Remastered, which came out earlier this year, as well as The Last of Us Part 1 Remake, which just came out, as well as this rumored Horizon Zero Dawn Remake Remaster that we heard about recently in a leak. These updated titles offer graphically enhanced versions of successful games that include PS5 specific updates like haptic feedback and 3D audio, as well as a full suite of accessibility features. If there's a bow in this game or muddy driving sections, that's even better for the marketing because you can best believe that's going to help sell that DualSense functionality. Now, you might be wondering why I am not including the Demon's Souls remake and some of the director's cuts that we've had so far in this phase of the strategy. And that is because of one specific reason, and that is that the release of this narrative remake remaster needs to coincide with a PlayStation Studios TV or movie initiative in what can only probably be described as the Witcher strategy. The Witcher 3 was a popular game at release, but as with most games, it began to wane and fade over time into the background of gamer conversation and interest. But there was this tremendous surge in popularity and sales for the game when the Witcher TV series came out on Netflix. By introducing this property through a different medium, it allowed new audiences to discover the video games for the first time, or gamers who never gave it a chance to finally decide to give it a go. This is also currently happening for CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077 due to the Cyberpunk Edge Runners series also on Netflix. And Sony clearly is looking to capitalize on this strategy, except rather than having an older, discounted game to have that surge, they want a full-priced, newer version to maximize that earning potential. For instance, Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy Remastered released a mere few days ahead of the Uncharted movie. And The Last of Us Part 1 has been just recently upgraded and enhanced at full price just ahead of The Last of Us TV series releasing early next year. We also know that Sony has an Amazon Prime God of War show, a Gran Turismo show, a Ghost of Tsushima movie, as well as a Peacock Twisted Metal show. And also Netflix is going to have a Horizon show. And when we heard that Horizon was getting a remake remaster, despite how freaking ridiculous that sounds, it actually probably makes good business sense. Sony wants these TV shows or movies to cross-promote their games, and vice versa. So much so that anyone newly interested in the video games are going to want to buy a fully priced version. And this will be a way for them to get a double dip in sales for these games. First with the hardcore gamers who never miss a PlayStation exclusive, and next with the possibly more casual TV show watchers who might want to experience the story again in the most accessible format through the medium of video games. And Sony can even go for a triple dip because they purchased Nixxes to port all of their games over to PC, and this will allow a new player base to experience these games and even do some of those crazy mods that go viral and basically do the marketing for you. And that's a lot, but this is not all. This only gets you part of the way there because Sony clearly is looking to add more than just these one-off narrative experiences as a means for players and viewers to immerse themselves into these worlds. Starting this fiscal year, Sony is planning to pour almost half of its budget into live service games, largely centered around their beloved established IP. We have already seen a glimpse of this with the reveal and hints for The Last of Us Factions 2, a standalone multiplayer experience with a story, characters, and you guessed it, microtransactions. We've also seen through leaks that there is a Horizon multiplayer seemingly set to be some sort of a Monster Hunter World clone that is in development. And it's not clear when they plan to release these experiences, but I would imagine they would release them after the respective show or movie has premiered, so as to serve as a replayability experience that keeps fans occupied until the next single-player game and or subsequent season or sequel movie. And so some have worried that Sony is done with their single-player games, but I think they rather are just going to be timing them so as to repeat this cycle over and over again. A single player game, a movie or a season of TV, and a new multiplayer or new update for that multiplayer. Rinse and repeat. Except that even this is not all, because it also seems that they plan to continue to give additional entries into these worlds through PSVR 2 experiences, such as Horizon Call of the Mountain. And Sony also seems to have some sort of a mobile gaming strategy as well, which makes me want to barf, especially thinking about a potential Factions 2 mobile. But this is all in interest of setting up some sort of a perpetual content machine that never lets players even have a moment to breathe from their favorite IP, with multiple avenues of entry. And this seems to be taking a page from Disney's Marvel and Star Wars franchises that have multiple endless entries, which at this rate probably will go as far as covering Captain America's grandma and Darth Vader's mutated poop. And so, what do I think about all this? As you can tell, I am not too thrilled, but I will start with the good first. I do love my multiplayer experiences, and especially Factions. And Sony has been kind of lacking in the multiplayer space, so seeing so much money and support pour in for that is pretty encouraging. I mean, the Horizon Monster Hunter game actually kind of sounds interesting. And also, in that same breath, hearing that they're not going to get rid of their beloved single players also makes me happy. But I also worry about how greedy Sony is becoming. Of course, they need to make money. That's the point of a business. And they need to find ways to compete against Xbox and Game Pass, but this just appears to be a bit excessive. Throughout this generation, it's felt like Sony just wants to squeeze every last penny out of their most hardcore fans without seeming to be able to part with any sort of goodwill. It honestly feels kind of like a risky move to be kind of making an already toxic gaming environment even more toxic in this way. I mean, the discourse around The Last of Us Part 1 and again with the Horizon remake was very negative, in large part due to what seems like pretty shrewd business moves from Sony, and this just seems to send a toxic cloud over each of these games' releases, despite how PlayStation fans feel. And this only seems to be the beginning because it looks like Sony has much more in store. I mean, how are they going to try to refresh God of War ahead of that Amazon show? Are we going to get a God of War 2018 remake? Or how else are they going to make sure that an updated entry is around for their double dip plans? And I also worry about the marvelization of my favorite IPs. Is it only a matter of time before we get a David spin-off series? And how might this stifle the creativity of our favorite developers? I want Naughty Dog, for instance, to make a new IP, but now they might have to worry and be limited to create only something that can more easily be turned into a successful TV show or movie, and be able to produce another multiplayer and a VR title and all the rest. Or staying on Naughty Dog, even though I think The Last of Us Part 3 is a necessary story to tell, I don't want this immense pressure for A Last of Us Part 4 or 5, or to run this series into the ground because this property is making Sony too much money for them to stop. But before I go too doom and gloom, let's just not get too ahead of ourselves. While this looks to be the strategy for Sony going forward, we don't fully know what this will actually look like in practice and whether or not it will actually turn out to be so bad. And so, while we wait to see these plans come to fruition, if you want to know what Naughty Dog specifically has in store for next year and how that will play into this Sony strategy, you should check this video out. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.